After players finish the main story of Destiny 2, completing the majority of quests and seasonal content, the player is introduced to a new section of Destiny's gameplay, the endgame content. Endgame content is typically quite challenging, and is catered toward players who are searching for a sense of mastery. When players approach the endgame content of Destiny 2, several activities become accessible. Trials of Osiris allows players to face off in 5v5 matchups, where each player's individual level can give them an advantage in fights. Dungeons such as Prophecy and Pit of Heresy provide puzzles and complicated mechanics, as well as combat against AI-controlled enemies. Nightfall strikes allow players to experience challenging versions of their favorite strike activities. However, there is one endgame activity that I believe is the pinnacle of the Destiny 2 experience: raids. Raids are mechanically intensive activities that combine puzzle solving and boss fights. This game mode launches 6 players into a location that is rich in Destiny 2 lore, allowing them to savor the environments and defeat monolithic threats to Destiny's narrative universe. These adventures last anywhere from 2 to 4 hours and demand more teamwork than any other game mode in Destiny. To successfully complete a raid, a team must be on the same wavelength, with each member fulfilling a different role, simultaneously, with proper and timely communication. And that's where the difficulty comes in. Raid mechanics are elaborate and often fairly abstract. They force players to get creatively specific with their callouts, as demonstrated in the raid Last Wish. A few of the sections, otherwise known as encounters of Last Wish, involve detailed symbols, with several of the symbols appearing identical at first glance. There are 4 fish symbols, 4 snake symbols, 4 dragon symbols, and 4 bird symbols. Out of necessity and creativity, the community has created their own callouts for certain symbols, with this symbol known as fish screaming in kelp, and this symbol commonly referred to as, and no, this is not a joke, pole dancing dragon. These oddly specific callouts surprisingly make communication easier during raids, as opposed to, it's a dragon with 2 legs, with a spear, with its mouth open, which could easily be referring to 2 of the dragon symbols. Raids demand concise and timely communication, as a consequence for vague or slow callouts is death. Precise communication is helpful in several areas of life, including relationships, careers, and creative endeavors. Raids force players to learn not only how to communicate with their teammates, but how to do so under pressure, a skill that is beneficial both online and in the real world. Every one of Destiny 2's raids takes place in a significant location from the game's story. Garden of Salvation is set in the Black Garden, where the Vex defend both their birthplace and a mysterious artifact known as the Black Heart. This location exists in Paradox, with the lore snippet Legend of the Black Garden reading, "The garden grows in both directions. It grows into tomorrow and yesterday. The red flowers bloom forever." The Black Garden is not merely a location players read about in lore books. The raid Garden of Salvation drops players into the midst of the Black Garden, and it is they who fight the Soul Divisive, the innermost guardians of the Black Heart. It is the players who gaze across the vast fields of flowers and ancient structures that seem to go on forever, and do. It is the players who discover a colossal enemy the size of the tower, and have to kill it. While some games simply tell players about heroes of legend who fought massive monsters and brought safety to the land, Destiny 2's raids allow players to live these stories. The beginning of the raid Last Wish informs players of a threat, Riven of 1,000 Voices, a wish-granting dragon with the capacity to imitate voices and lure victims to their death. However, the narrative doesn't stop there. In Last Wish, players must infiltrate the Dreaming City, solving puzzles with complicated mechanics and defeating mini-bosses. Near the end of the raid, players stand on plates arranged in a huge circle. When every plate is occupied by a player, the plates give way, and each player free falls into a massive room. In the center of the room, there she is, Riven of 1,000 Voices, an amalgamation of bone, teeth, and eyes. the size of a several-story building. She possesses multiple methods of killing the player, including enormous tentacles, fire breath, a corrosive aura that drains life, and a pocket dimension filled with deadly enemies. And you have to kill her. This boss fight makes the stakes palpable, with every mistake becoming punishable by death. Killing Riven is not as simple as concentrated gunfire. In summary, players split into two teams who alternate between baiting Riven's attacks and completing a puzzle that requires precise communication. One of the teams will shoot 2 of Riven's 10 eyes that were called out by the other team, and the process repeats. After one more round, both teams will reunite in the starting room. The entire team will bait out Riven's attacks and memorize the 2 eyes she reveals, and this will repeat twice. After baiting all of Riven's attacks, damage phase begins and players shoot her mouth, before shooting every eye that was previously revealed. Players will return to their original plates and free fall once more, shooting Riven's blisters for extra damage. If enough damage is done, Riven will bend reality and send players into a pocket dimension, where they must do parkour while their life is gradually draining. If this step is done correctly, players are teleported out of the pocket dimension and return to damage phase. If her life bar is drained completely, players have successfully killed Riven of 1,000 voices. Almost. To kill Riven, for good, players must jump into her corpse's mouth and run through her intestines to her heart, and they must shoot her heart with everything they've got. If her heart dies, the boss battle is complete. Although this section is not the final part of the raid, it encapsulates the feeling of being a hero, staring up at a monster with endless methods of destruction. Players don't kill Riven like a random Vex enemy, shooting her mindlessly until she falls. Players kill Riven like the threat she is, frantically dodging her attacks and narrowly avoiding death, all while memorizing which eyes to shoot. Every step of the boss fight must be executed perfectly, or the entire team will be killed instantly. Being forced to personally challenge and defeat a narrative threat creates an incredible sense of immersion, one that surpasses any of the other endgame activities. One factor that sets raids apart from other activities in Destiny 2 is that every step of the raid requires an experienced player to teach mechanics to newer players. This necessity creates an entire subculture in Destiny's community: Sherpas. Sherpas are players who have completed a raid multiple times, and now seek to teach players who have never done the raid before. Sherpas often memorize concise explanations and occasionally create their own diagrams to explain concepts. Most Sherpas don't require any loot from the raid, and just teach raids for fun or personal fulfillment. One of my personal favorite things to do in Destiny 2 is teach raids to new players. It restores my love for the game as I watch people experience mechanics for the first time and have the privilege of witnessing their awe. I also create my own visual raid guides, including diagrams and walkthroughs for each encounter. Every raid I teach refines my ability to not only understand the raid, but help others understand it. Teaching raids has introduced me to dozens of people, and a few friends I play games with every night. This opportunity was only created because I initially made the decision to step out to the unknown and try the raid for the first time. Raids are ultimately why I play Destiny 2. They require 6 different people to communicate, work in harmony, and execute complicated mechanics, all as one unit. Even if a team has issues working in concert, there is always that moment when the mechanics click, and what was once math gracefully transitions into music. Raids are highly immersive and allow players to personally experience the stories they've read about in lore entries. They are the ones who have to challenge beings with the power to bend time and dimensions to their will, and in that moment, they feel the fear of every hero of legend. Raids are also excellent opportunities for experienced players to coach newer players and get involved in the amazing community of Destiny 2. They encourage players to selflessly help their peers, positively impacting the experience of new players. At their core, raids are also just a lot of fun. So what are you waiting for, Guardian? The threats are already there, sleeping in the underbelly of the dreaming city and the heart of the Black Garden. Are you brave enough to wake them? Top left,
No,
top
I'll
left.
get on there.
Oh,
Wait.
dude, I got hit off by a
Never mind.
Phalanx, so I need somebody to switch for me.
Oh, I
Take this
can't
one.
take this.
I can switch for mid. Ready?
I can't, I'm dying.
Everyone.
Top right, middle, and then...
I can do middle. We need
I'm-
top. Oh, I
my
can't do
God.
middle.
It's a
We need middle.
Oh, well.